The classroom was in one of the original buildings of Hewlett College in Berkeley. The structure had a functional mid-century modern style, boxy and metallic in glass. Jake was sometimes asked if the school, not far from Silicon Valley, was named after the Hewlett, and he'd answer, well, she thought of herself that way. The school's founder was not the computer and printer innovator who was Packard's partner, but Rebecca Hewlett, the billionaire shipping magnate who'd turned from industry to activism and education. She'd written a single check to get the school up and running. Jake walked to the podium and organized his notes. Slowly, taking his time. Understated otherwise, he tended toward the dramatic in front of a class. At 6'2", he often slouched, occasionally telling himself he shouldn't, but unable to come up with a reason why not. His straight brown hair was characteristically unruly, and the trim beard aged him some, though the lighter strands were blonde, not gray. Pale, dotted with a few freckles, Jake had not had a tan since the summer after his senior year in high school, 18 years ago, when his uncle had tried, unsuccessfully, to instill a love of fishing in Jake and his older brother Rudy. This morning, he wore his typical attire: black jeans, scuffed brown slip-on shoes, a somber blue sweatshirt over an equally drab gray crewneck. The garb was typical of much of the staff. Hewlett was not an institution of professional tweed and country club casual. He scanned the class, mostly senior students, noting some absences and a few hostile looks. Familiar with the reason for both, Jake could only be amused. The hall grew quiet under his scrutiny. "Morning," he began, his deep voice conveying a natural gravity. He skipped the pleasantries and got straight to the subject matter. Colonial America, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The world of Hamilton, of Redcoats, King George, Revolution, all that. But do you know the two greatest concerns citizens wrote about at the time? More than tea tax? Blank stares met his penetrating gaze. Gossiping and eavesdropping. They obsessed the colonists. Threats to their privacy. Here's a quotation from a visitor from the UK in 18th century America. In England, everyone appears to find full employment in his own concerns. Here, it would seem the people are restless until they know everyone's business. Chuckles from the class. I'm talking about intrusion, which I define as someone or something deliberately entering into a place or situation where they're unwelcome or uninvited. In this course, we'll look at human history through the lens of those violations and learn what the intrudee could have done and can do to protect themselves against the intruder. He waited while students scrawled notes onto paper or typed them into a laptop. He did not allow audio or video recordings of his lectures. What types of intrusion will we cover? Crime, for one. All criminals intrude. Then war. There have been 588 full-throated invasions by one nation-state against another since the Peloponnesian War in the 5th century BC, and tens of thousands of smaller incursions throughout history. Then there's political intrusion. All laws and regulations affect us, and some consider those intrusive. Government snooping? Intrusion. Corporate data mining? Intrusion. And what about religion? When does a comforting sect step so far into your life you find yourself in a cult or a terrorist cell? He glanced around the classroom. Everyone took copious notes, but how many appreciated his meaning? None of them. Yet. He still had months to bring them around. Your personal lives, he plowed on. All relationships, whether romantic partners, friends, family, or coworkers, involve letting someone inside your boundaries. Sometimes that's welcome. An alliance, I call it. Sometimes it's negative. That's intrusion, psychologically and physically dangerous. Look at abused spouses and children. He knew students would have mixed reactions to his words. Jeffery Heron had been called a crackpot more than once. He'd been called pompous and strident and paranoid. Like all those who preached, however, he continued to spread his message despite the repercussions. His mission was to make his students and clients and lecture audiences aware of how quickly people could surrender to threats that were becoming increasingly insidious and difficult to recognize. He knew these dangers from bitter personal experience. We'll start today with a subject dear to everyone's heart: government overreach. Remember the revolutionary colonists? Do you know who the premier gossip mongers in those days were? When no hands went up, he continued, snooping town postmasters. Thanks to them, any letter might as well have been nailed up in the town square for the world to see. Sound familiar? Comprehension dawned on a few faces now. A truly satisfying feeling. All teachers and professors recognized it. Exactly like hacking your emails today, he said, spelling it out for the rest. Let's talk about some of the philosophical underpinnings of the concept of privacy back then. 45 minutes later, Jake concluded his lecture and assessed the class. It was a good one, more attentive than most, he decided. He was giving them the URL for his website, which contained the course syllabus, when his voice halted like a seized engine. The hallway outside the classroom was shadowy. Even a well-endowed institution like Hewlett didn't waste money on unnecessary lighting. But there was no doubt who he was looking at. And, as he watched Carmen Sanchez, arms crossed, looking his way, he couldn't help but recall the words he'd recited to his class. Deliberately entering into a place or situation where you're unwelcome or uninvited.